I think the merging of the two bodies is important, and it does give us an important opportunity to focus on how we in this country can promote human rights and equality, which I think is absolutely critical. But I do think we have to take a step back, and talking about equality is one thing, but we need to have the resources to back it up. And I just want to maybe start by speaking a little bit about rights for people with disabilities and supports for those sectors, because what we've seen is a lot of reference to this on paper, but simultaneously to this, decisions being made inside the Department of Social Welfare, the Department of Education and so on, which are adversely impacting on the lives of disabled citizens and preventing them from having an equal stake in our society. And I just want to maybe mention two examples of that. The first is the Gateway Scheme, which in my opinion is a slave labour chain gang type facility to make up for the fact that local authority jobs are being eroded, and we've lost thousands of them over the last number of years. Now, traditionally, local authorities provided for and kept by, if you like, substantial enough positions for people with disabilities, and indeed for members of the travelling communities and so on, people in our society who would be otherwise discriminated against, to give them an equal opportunity. By no jobs existing in the local authorities now, people are unable to access their right to employment. I think this is a substantial step back. I'm aware as well that many disabled citizens who rely on personal assistance have seen those hours cut and not replaced, and I think that's very reprehensible as well. So I think talking the talk is one thing, but we need to deliver it with resources too. I just want to maybe refer to particular groups in our society that need our protection when we talk about human rights, and one is the issue which has been alluded to, that of the travelling community. Now, the Council of Europe ECRI report a year ago noted that Ireland has a weakness, that we have no legislation dealing with the area of racial profiling, and that we should have such legislation, and that they will be coming back to check up on us in the very near future. The ECRI report also noted that there needed to be stronger efforts with regard to the whole area of accommodation and the National Traveller Roma Accommodation Platform, where it spoke about Ireland having a need to introduce measures which were binding on local authorities with regard to traveller accommodation. And I think this is something that absolutely needs to be beefed up. And you know, the way in which we respond to issues which some of the more vulnerable sectors of our society experience does dictate a lot how those groups feel about how they're valued in society. Now, the iReport facility is a reporting system for people, communities and organisations in Ireland who document incidents that occur of a racist character, and they have recounted and experienced a lot of very serious incidents that citizens, both people who are not born in Ireland but also members of the travelling community, have experienced in our state. And if we're really serious about equality and human rights, we'll be addressing these issues. Now, sometimes racist issues occur, but how the state responds actually is often the most hurtful for those victims. And some of the accounts that organisation has of how Gardaí responded to racist incidents has been quite shocking, with very few of those incidents explored properly, only 1 out of 100 being able to verify being in receipt of an incident number and a proper investigation going on. And I think the poor level of communication does add to the upset and confusion which victims feel. And just to maybe experience or highlight some of those incidents where the Gardaí told a white man reporting a car break-in that travellers were probably responsible for the crime before he had conducted any investigation into the crime. Another incident recounted a scenario where a Garda questioning walkers at a popular tourist site questioned one man very aggressively about car break-ins when he learned that that man had a name which was a name synonymous with members of the travelling community. And again, a family visiting a Garda station to request a stamp on their forms, only to find the Garda laughing and joking and stamping the hands of the children as well, and feeling very degraded by that experience. experience, and you are aware, Minister, of the fact that traveller children have been entered on the PULSE system, causing huge upset to their families, and despite the denials of the former Commissioner that such racial profiling does not exist, I think external bodies and, if you like, the proof of the PULSE system shows that indeed that has taken place in our society. And that is not just a serious erosion of human rights and a degradation of our citizens, but it is also adding to problems in the future. And I'll give maybe an example of one other family to explain how this system works. And I had mentioned previously, a number of weeks ago, I spent a Sunday afternoon in Rathkeale with some members of the travelling community down there, and one man, quite a successful businessman, who admitted that maybe one or two members of his family previously had been involved in a not good way with the Gardaí in terms of some problems there, but he himself was a law-abiding citizen who never had any problems with the law. But his home was broken into in a violent armed robbery. His family held at gunpoint. He was beaten in front of his grandchildren. And the Gardaí did not investigate that robbery, in their opinion, because they were members of the travelling community. The gang went on to rob other families in the area and were eventually caught. Subsequent to that, the Criminal Assets Bureau conducted a raid on that property, and again the family were held at gunpoint, except this time there were no men present. There was a granny, a mother and some grandchildren, and the young boy basically faced armed Gardaí in the Criminal Assets Bureau, no lights on, with the helmets with the lights on, feeling that his grandparent and mother were going to be shot. Now, and thinking it was the same burglars, if you like, that had been there before, coming back again. Now, this family had property taken from them, which was later showed on television, along with a slogan saying "proceeds from criminal activity." Now, I saw the property, I sat beside it, the painting and so on. It was given back to the family. It wasn't misappropriated. It was their own personal property. But these people were tarred, vilified and demonised, in my opinion, simply because they were members of the travelling community. And it's these antics that alienate generation after generation. That 10-year-old boy who witnessed his family being held at gunpoint isn't really going to respect the Gardaí anymore, nor is his uncle, who was also stopped on the laneway and pulled out from their own lane and beaten up by the Gardaí, again for no valid reason. So unless we start seriously looking at measures to protect some of the most vulnerable groups in our society, then talking about merging human rights organisations and talking about equality is simply that. We need to educate all facets of the state in its dealing with minority groups. I mean, the worst case obviously was the taking of the Roma children earlier this year, which is a matter of present inquiry, but we need to respond far more seriously on this, and I really think you need to do more in terms of the PULSE inquiry set up as well, because we're alienating generation after generation of our population, apart from the appalling indictment it is about the lack of our human rights standards as they exist now, because travellers and indeed the Roma population are amongst the most excluded of our society. I think briefly in terms of a number of other issues where we need to deliver on, and again because of time I'll probably only just mention two of them. But one is the whole area of women's access to abortion, where Ireland has been rightly criticised because of the violation of women's human rights in this country because of our lack of appropriate legislation for abortion. Now, we did pass some pretty weak and appalling legislation last year, which was supposed to give protection in law for a woman whose life was in danger and allowing her to access a termination of a pregnancy. My own belief is that that law falls well short of that and does not do that, and critically it excludes from it that group of people to whom tragically discover that the fetus which they are carrying has a fatal abnormality not compatible with life. Now, previous Attorney Generals have advised this state that those people had potentially a right to secure an abortion in Ireland by arguing in the European courts that the person at the case, did not exploit all domestic avenues before taking the case to Europe, implying that had she done that, there would have been a hearing granted even within the confines of our constitution. And yet this government has failed within the last year to legislate in the area of allowing abortion for fetal abnormalities, which to my mind is degrading, inhuman and a gross violation of people's human rights. And the last point I'll make, Ceann Comhairle, is simply in relation to the area of prisoners, which I have to say this is an area which I think the Minister is quite on top of his brief in a manner in which previous ministers haven't been in relation to what goes on in Irish prisons. I welcome the fact that the programme in terms of slopping out is underway. I know these things take time, but what is a problem, and I'm very surprised given the Minister's knowledge of this area, that he has stood over a situation where we are allowing multi-cell occupancy, is, I think, a degradation of human rights. We should not be forcing on people having to share a cell in a prison environment. It's not good for staff, it's not good for the prisoners themselves. So I think if we are to advance on a state, then as a state, in terms of our protection of human rights, then we need to address all of these concerns, not just talk about them.